Jeff Bezos uses a 60-second mental exercise to make billion-dollar decisions. I've used it to make financial ones, and you can too. Let me walk you through it. The framework that flips the script. The idea is so simple, it almost sounds too obvious, but the simplicity is the point. Here's how Bezos thinks about every big choice. Imagine you're 80 years old. You're sitting back maybe on a porch somewhere, thinking about your life. Now look back on the decision in front of you. Ask yourself, will I regret not doing it? If the answer is yes, you do it. If the answer is no, you let it go. That's the whole model. He calls it the regret minimization framework. It strips out all the noise, no stress, no panic, just you, future you, and a gut check from a wiser version of yourself. I can't tell you how many times this has stopped me from making short-term moves I would have absolutely regretted later. But to really understand why this matters, let's rewind back to when Bezos first used it. The day Bezos walked away from Wall Street. It was 1994. Jeff Bezos had a stable job at a hedge fund. Great pay, New York life. Things were safe, but he saw something brewing. The internet. Back then, it wasn't obvious. The internet felt like a nerdy toy, not a business engine. But Bezos had an idea. Sell books online. He floated it past his boss. His boss told him to take 48 hours to really think it through. Smart move. Bezos went home, thought about the comfort he'd be leaving behind, the bonus he'd missed that year, and then he imagined being 80. Would he regret starting an internet bookstore and failing? Nope. Would he regret not trying at all? Yes, definitely. So he quit. He packed up, drove across the country, and started Amazon from scratch. That moment, the 48-hour pause, the projection to age 80, that was the regret minimization framework in action. And it didn't just build a trillion-dollar company, it gave him peace. And that peace is something any of us can have too, even if the decision in front of us isn't about building the next Amazon. Why this framework works and why most people don't use it. See, most people make money decisions in panic mode. We get stuck in short-term thinking. Do I invest now or later? Do I buy this thing I want or save the money? Should I help family or keep my finances tight? And when emotions are high, clarity disappears. It's hard to think in decades when you're stressing about tomorrow. But here's what this framework does. It removes the emotion from the front seat and puts perspective in charge. It lets you time travel, not literally, but mentally. You step out of the noise and into a quiet place where the only voice that matters is your future self. It's like talking to the wiser version of you, the one who's seen how the story ends, and you don't need to be Jeff Bezos to use it. You just need a question and a moment of honesty. I've been there, sitting with my head in my hands, calculator in one tab, panic in the other, trying to figure out the right move like I was defusing a bomb. But short-term thinking never gives good answers. It just gives urgent ones. That's what makes this framework different. It doesn't ask, what feels safe right now? It asks, what will matter when this season is just a memory? And that changes the whole equation. You stop asking, what if I lose? And start asking, what if I never try? You stop thinking about failure like a cliff, and more like a curve you can learn from. Even when I've made mistakes, using this lens helped me forgive myself faster, because I knew I chose with intention, not fear. Most people aren't reckless with money because they're irresponsible. They're reckless because they're reactive. This helps you get ahead of the reaction and act instead. It teaches you to pause before the impulse, to choose long-term peace over short-term relief. And in a world that constantly tells us to move fast, this framework quietly asks us to think slow, to breathe, to zoom out, and that's where the good decisions live. Financial decisions that feel huge, but get clear with this framework. Let's walk through some real-life examples. These are decisions I've personally faced, and maybe you have too. Should I start investing now or wait until I know more? I used to say, I'll wait until I'm making more money, or I'll wait until I understand everything. But every time I used the framework, the answer was obvious. At 80, would I regret starting to invest at 25? Never. Would I regret waiting until 45 and missing decades of compound growth? Yeah, deeply. So I started with what I had, even if it was small. The first few years felt like a crawl, but now those early deposits are doing more work than I am. Time is carrying the weight. The regret of missing out on compounding is real once and silent or until it's too late. Should I buy this luxury car? I remember test driving this slick, shiny, perfect car. I wanted it bad. But then I asked myself, will 80-year-old me look back and say, I'm glad I had that car for 3 years? Not a chance. Would I regret putting $50,000 into something that drops in value the moment I drive off the lot? Yeah, so I skipped it. I kept my old car. That money, it's growing. It's earning more than the car ever could. I've never once looked back and thought, man, I should have flexed with that car. Should I invest in a course or a skill? Now this one hits differently. Years ago, I wanted to take a pricey online course that promised to level up my skills, but I hesitated. It felt like a risk. What if it didn't pay off? But when I imagined my 80-year-old self, the answer was clear. He'd say, that course changed your direction, because it did. The skill I gained opened new doors, brought in better income, and gave me confidence I didn't have before. Regret never comes from investing in yourself. If the ROI is even remotely positive, the long-term payoff is huge. At the time, I remember thinking, this money could go toward something safer. I was calculating how many dinners, bills, or tech upgrades I could buy instead. But deep down, I knew those things wouldn't move the needle on my future. The course wasn't just about skill, it was about identity. It told my brain, hey, we're serious about growth. That shift alone changed how I carried myself, how I applied for roles, how I priced my work. The funny thing is, I don't even remember the hesitation anymore, only the outcome. The knowledge stuck, the confidence lasted, and the money, it came back multiple times over. What I would have remembered is skipping it, dragging the same insecurities around for another year, maybe longer, wondering what could have happened if I'd just taken the leap. That's the sneaky thing about regret. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers over time. A missed opportunity here, a small decision deferred there, until one day you look up and realize the future you hoped for quietly drifted away. But when you bet on yourself, even if it's just one course, one class, one skill, you change the direction of that drift. You put wind in your own sails, and 80-year-old you, they'll remember that. Not the cost, not the momentary fear, just the fact that you chose to grow. Should I help family financially? This one's tough. It's emotional. Years ago, my mom needed help covering a medical bill. It wasn't convenient, but I ran it through the framework. At 80, would I regret tightening my belt a little to help her? No. Would I regret staying silent while she struggled? Deeply. So I helped, and I've never second-guessed it. Helping people you love, and when it's within reason, is something your future self almost never regrets. Should I take this career risk? Career moves can be terrifying. I once passed up a secure job offer to try something that aligned better with my long-term goals. It wasn't reckless. I had a backup plan, but it was risky. I imagined myself at 80. Would I regret playing it safe and missing a shot at something better? Yeah, so I jumped. It worked out. But even if it hadn't, I'd sleep better knowing I tried. The framework doesn't promise success, but it does guard you from haunting what-ifs. Should I save or enjoy life now? Now this one's tricky. We've all heard YOLO and save for the future. They fight each other in your head, but when I ran it through the framework, I realized the answer wasn't one or the other. At 80, would I regret never enjoying my 20s or 30s? Yes. Would I regret having zero savings in my 50s or 60s? Absolutely. So I set a 70-30 split. Save 70%, enjoy 30%. It's not perfect, but it gives me room to live and still feel safe about tomorrow. The psychology behind all this. The reason this works has to do with a concept called temporal discounting. It's the tendency we all have to undervalue the future. Basically, our brains are wired to chase short-term wins and ignore long-term consequences. But the framework forces you to flip that. When you ask what your 80-year-old self would regret, you bypass the dopamine hits and see the real value behind a choice. It clears away peer pressure, social media flexes, FOMO, all of it. It brings your actual values to the surface because it's not about doing what looks good now. It's about what you'll be proud of later. How to actually use this. So let's say you're facing a big decision. Here's how I use the regret minimization framework. I close my eyes. I imagine myself at 80. Not just old me, but peaceful me. A version that's reflective, wise, unhurried. Then I look back on the decision. I ask one question. Would I regret not doing this? If the answer is yes, I go for it. If the answer is no, or if future me is smiling, knowing I passed, I walk away. If I'm unsure, it means I need more data, more clarity. This isn't a cheat code, it's a compass. Because sometimes I've used this framework and been surprised by what came up. A choice that felt exciting in the moment suddenly looked hollow when I imagined the long view. And something I was scared of, it turned into something I knew I'd regret not doing. It's wild how quiet things get when you picture your future self. The noise of everyone else's opinions fades. The deadlines, the pressure, the social media comparison, gone. It's just you and your own truth staring back across time. That's what makes this so powerful. It's not a trick. It's not about hacking your brain. It's about slowing down just long enough to remember what really matters to you. And I mean really matters, not just this year, not just this season, but in the bigger picture, in the story of your life. Would the version of you who's seen it all be proud you took the leap? Or would they quietly wish you'd had the guts to go for it? Sometimes we don't need permission, we need perspective. And this framework gives it instantly, not by telling you what to do, but by revealing what you already know deep down. That's why I keep using it. Not because it tells me the future, but because it keeps me aligned with the future I actually want to create. What people actually regret and don't. The research is wild. Bronnie Ware, a palliative nurse who spoke with hundreds of dying patients, found the top regrets weren't about money or stuff. They were about dreams not chased, relationships not nurtured, risks not taken. People regretted playing small, living someone else's life, saying no to things that lit them up. What they didn't regret? Fancy purchases, impressing strangers, playing it safe. That perspective is powerful, Weebs, because it tells you what actually matters. And chances are it's not the thing you're stressing about right now. And that's the part that really stuck with me. Because when you're young or even just in the middle of life, it's easy to forget what the end might feel like. You think you've got time. You always think you've got time until suddenly you don't. I read Bronnie's words and something clicked. Nobody said, "I wish I had bought more tech." Nobody said, "I wish I had worked more weekends." They talked about people. They talked about courage. They talked about joy and time and meaning. Not net worth or square footage or number of followers. It made me realize how often I've chased things that won't matter in the long run. How often I've let fear shrink my choices down. And how many times I've said no to something I really wanted, not because I couldn't do it, but because I was afraid to fail. But future me, 80-year-old me, he's not keeping score of the failures. He's cheering for the attempts. Because the attempts meant I was alive. I was in it. That's what regret-free living actually looks like. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do what matters before it's too late. You don't need to use this for everything. Not every decision needs this level of deep introspection. If you're choosing between 2 coffee brands or figuring out where to order lunch, don't overthink it. This is for the big stuff, the $1,000 decisions, the "this could change my life" choices. Because the moment you use this once and feel the relief that comes from clarity, you'll start trusting it. It's a little like training a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger your long-term thinking becomes. I've used this framework to skip bad investments, chase better careers, start businesses, say no to shiny distractions, and say yes to things that scared me in the best way. It hasn't always been easy, but I can say this honestly. I've never once regretted using it. It's not about being fearless. It's about being clear. And clarity, that's the real luxury. If this helped you in any way, share it with someone who's stuck making a hard decision right now. Seriously, this framework might be exactly what they need. And hey, and if you want more tools like this, subscribe. There's more where this came from. Your future self is counting on you.